Hey cats, it's your footwear fiend Eddbud here. Today I've got an initial review for you of a shoe that many people are going to be interested in. In hand we got the Saucony Endorphin Speed 4. It's a super trainer of sorts, I guess, with a very light feel and a nylon plate here within the midsole. It's been a popular choice for runners since it first launched in 2020, but has it moved on enough to make it an absolute necessary pickup for your shoe rotations? Let's check it out. Thanks for joining me on the channel. It is always appreciated. Do help us to reach 50,000 subscribers by clicking that button below. And also giving this video a thumbs up like. It really helps out. Dankeschön. My pair of the Speed 4 from Saucony come in at 277 grams. So that's about 9.8 ounces. I've got a UK 11, US size 12 here. Just want to make it very clear that as the size of the shoe goes up, the weight goes up, but also the midsole stack as well. A few people watching my Alphafly 3 video suggested I had the midsole stack wrong. Now I give the measurements for my pair of the shoes, not the sample size, okay? So just to bear that in mind in the future. I've got about 41mm of heel stack here in my pair of the Speed 4, and there's about 33 in the forefoot, so we're pretty much in the ballpark there for an 8mm drop, which is what Saucony suggest you should have in this shoe on the website. So that is a 17 gram increase over the Speed 3. That's quite a large amount actually for a single iteration. I've got about 12.2 centimeters at the widest point in the forefoot. That's actually the same as the Alphafly 3, bizarrely, and about 9.6 centimeters at the widest point in the heel. So the Speed 4 coming in marginally wider actually in both areas than the Endorphin Pro 4, the big brother. It's only about 0.2 of a centimeter, but I thought I'd better let you know. I'm getting Short A durometer softness scores here for the midsole of about 24 to 26 in the pwrrun PEBA midsole, making it still one of the softer running shoes out there. The average is about 28. The lower the number, the softer the midsole. Well, I like that. I might have to include that next time. I would suggest though that the Endorphin Pro 4 is actually markedly more compressive in the heel over the Speed 4. I think that could be down to the extra layer of pwrrun HG foam that's in the Pro 4. It's just P-backs here in terms of the pwrrun PB. I did go back and measure the original Saucony Endorphin Speed. That's about 260 grams, about 9.2 ounces. Very similar midsole stack underfoot as well. We do seem to have a lot more foam around the heel here. It sort of cups around the back of the foot. I think that's probably where some of the extra weight is. Just to clarify, this is a shoe that Saucony have sent me for review, but they're not vetting my views before my valued viewers get to see them. Okay. We will start with the upper first. Garden centre. Now, I do like the upper here on the Speed 4 better than the Speed 3. Didn't really get on all too well with that version. The tongue here is very padded, in fact, very vented. There's loads of little holes here. It does seem a little bit more breathable than the previous version of the shoe. There's a bit more tongue length here. There wasn't quite enough in the Speed 3. I would suggest it's probably a little bit too much, in fact, here in the Speed 4. I mean, you could always get your scissors out, but it's going to wreck the beauty of this shoe. It is a very attractive looking model, so there won't be any problems there with the tongue being too short and that lace tension sort of cutting into the top of the foot. Now, the laces here are very flexible once again, as per the Speed 3. They're almost elastic, I suppose, and it does make it a little bit harder to get a good lockdown in the shoe. Thankfully, that plastic heel counter that was on the outside of the shoe is gone. We've got a suede piece here now. There is a standard heel counter sort of within the back of the shoe. I've not felt any real rubbing there in the back of the shoe, though I did have to cinch the laces up quite a bit to get a good lockdown over the top of the foot. Does feel that there's a slightly lower profile here around the heel and Achilles area. Do quite like that. I don't like things to protrude too much into the ankle. We got a combo here of standard eyelets and some lace loops that make up the actual eyelet chains. I did have a little bit of bunching here in the front of the shoe. I've got a narrow to sort of normal width foot. Does feel like a slightly wider version of the Endorphin Speed this time out. The toe box does still have that lateral side taper though, and perhaps if it didn't really work for you in the last one, I think it won't all be that different this time. It certainly does feel a little bit more like a more up-tempo kind of daily use shoe, though otherwise I did really enjoy the simplicity that we had in the original version of the Saucony Endorphin Speed. That was one of the best like non-race shoes I've ever run in. Tongue here is partially gusseted. There's only a small section where it's gusseted. It's a quite elastic and thin material that kind of holds it together, and I didn't find I got any sort of tongue slide whatsoever. You can see here that Saucony are trying their absolute level best to keep the weight down. There's some silicone-like overlays that they've used here to reinforce the eyelets, just to improve that durability somewhat. And I do like the 3M touches on the Saucony logo, and that's the same here in the back of the shoe and on the medial side too. The toe box is a little bit thicker this time round. There are some reinforcements around the foot, again with that sort of silicone type feel. Does feel a little bit bulkier now than something like the Puma Deviate Nitro Elite 2. That falls into the same sort of price bracket now with the shoe, or like the Hyperion Max from Brooks, all kind of a similar feel. Though it does feel like a feather over something like Nike's very bulky tank-like Zoomfly 5. So if anything, the shoe is that little bit wider now and perhaps more accommodating for more voluminous feet, though perhaps not the most ideal fit for those with the very narrow feet. Just feels like this more upper here than there was before. I'm going to give it a 2.6 out of 3 for the upper after my initial runs. Midsole. Midsole.
Midsole now.
Midsole-wise, the decreased rigidity between this shoe and the Endorphin Pro 4 is very evident. It's a nylon plate here, and there's a lot more flex to the shoe, certainly on toe off. Just means it's more of a daily use shoe. It kind of fits into that, you know, jack of all trades kind of vibe. I think the gulf though between this shoe and the Endorphin Pro 4 is now more evident than ever. I remember going back to the Speed 1 and the Pro 1. I think there's about 28 grams of difference, so about an ounce difference between the two shoes. But the Speed 1 was very much a shoe that you could still race in. You know, 260 grams, that was fantastic. When you examine the Speed 4 and Pro 4 midsoles, they almost look like the same stack, but then you realise that quite a lot of the foam here is actually built up and around the foot. Just improves that stability, and that nylon plate goes some way to doing that as well. I've got to be honest though, I'm not the biggest fan of this winged plate whatsoever. I will let you know about that in a sec. There is a nice landing platform here. It is quite wide, though I am noticing that wider platform in the heel as well, which kind of brings it away a little bit from the original Speed that I really enjoyed. The pellet-based PEBA midsole here is very resilient. It doesn't feel quite as quick and nimble as it did before. It does feel a little bit less soft and compressive though over the Speed 3. So a little bit more consistency about it this time. On a longer 10-mile effort in this shoe, so it's about 16 kilometers or so, averaging sub 8 minutes per mile. I think it's about mile 6 or so, I had some really strange things happen in the left shoe. The heel area had some really weird kind of aches and pains. I do believe it's centered around that winged plate as well. I just don't feel that I want it there. It's a stabilizing element that's really causing some problems with my running gait, and it just feels like it's making me do certain things with my foot on landing that just don't feel natural. It's those easy to sort of steezy kind of marathon paces. Just didn't feel too good. I had to adapt my foot strike somewhat and speed up. Actually, it just didn't feel great like the Speed did before, really, going at any pace. Does want to go that bit faster. It didn't bother me to the point where I had to completely stop, but I even did take the shoe off to see if there was something weird, you know, going on with the left shoe rather than the right one. Maybe I could change things up a little bit lockdown wise. But on closer inspection, after removing the insole, the actual winged plate does seem to be very close to the foot actually. It protrudes upwards somewhat and into the bottom of the foot, and that was where it was causing me a problem. And in the right shoe, it doesn't seem to be the case. It's not quite so prominent. So the plate does seem to be reasonably close to the sides of the midsole base. It's a bit of a blow, really. I never had that problem with the Speed 1 and 2 that just had that standard nylon plate without the wings. That 4mm thick insole does go some way to stopping that issue, but the whole stability element here just means that this shoe will be a bit more of a niche offering than it was before. So I think if the Speed 3 was a winner for you in terms of the midsole, then you'll probably have the same sort of feeling here and same experiences. There are somewhat heavier iteration, which is a little bit down to the increased width. I'm going to give this one a 2.5 out of 3 after my initial runs for the midsole. Outsole wise, you could be fooled into thinking that the rubber here is exactly as per the Endorphin Pro 4. It does look that way, but actually the density of the sort of ridges here is quite different. The foam also doesn't sit completely flush here with the rubber in the heel area. Does protrude out a little bit, and I think that's going to mean that we get a little bit more wear and sort of exposed midsole degradation than perhaps in the Pro 4. After a somewhat varied surface 10-mile effort in the Speed 4, I got a little bit of discoloration there, as you can see. Though I can report that once again the forefoot rubber here is a big improvement in this iteration of the Endorphin Speed. It's better in terms of grip, traction, and even works quite well in wet weather too. So we got the same sort of improvement as we had in the Pro 4. That was one of the big bugbears really with the last version of the Endorphin Speed. In fact, with pretty much every version of it. It is certainly improved here. We've got about 3 to 4 millimeters here of rubber depth, and you know, they have minimized it as much as they can. There's a bit of exposed midsole cut out here too. It's for those faster, perhaps more nimble sessions now. It's not the jack of all trades kind of shoe and brilliant daily do-it-all one that it was before. I'm finding the rubber here is flexible enough that it still allows the shoe to move a little bit, and I think it will provide some really good traction over time. The rubber's pretty thick. I'm going to give it a 2.7 out of 3 for the outsole after my initial runs. Gotta talk value now. This one is coming in at 180 Earth credits now. That means it's right up alongside shoes like the Puma Deviate Nitro Elite 2. That's a carbon plate equipped shoe, don't forget. And very much for me, that was a race option too. I utilised that one in the Manchester Half last year. It had some great durability in that one, and there's similar foam capabilities as well. But coming in at a much lower weight than the Speed 4. I feel that the Speed 1 and 2 are a very different model now compared to what we've got here in 2024. Yes, it's a slightly more accommodating fit now, bit of a wider shoe too, but the added stability elements here certainly make it feel like the shoe's being pulled a little bit further away from its big brother, the Endorphin Pro. I think that winged plate here is almost taken away from what I could get from the shoe. Doesn't feel quite as nimble as it did before. I think that's a little bit down to the width. You can see the Pro 4 is a lot wider than the original Endorphin Speed, and I think it's actually quite noticeable now. It just doesn't feel quite as snappy. Just sort of added weight and perhaps some unwanted features as well that people don't really need. I think it'll still work for many people as a very versatile shoe. Can accommodate a reasonably wide range of paces and efforts. I think it's still going to appeal to many, though when you've got very sort of improved versions of the Takumi Sen out there now, and the Boston 12 as well, that do similar things to this shoe in terms of similar weight and much cheaper pricing, especially with the Boston 12, and a lot of excellently priced Puma shoes as well over the last year or so, does beg the question as to whether the Speed 4 should be the price it is. Just feel like the 1 and 2 were a sort of better tempo speed shoe. I have to say the quality of the shoe is great out the box as per usual with Saucony. It does feel like it's been slightly better put together. There's no glue marks or dodgy stitching. I think the durability is probably going to be similar to what we saw in the Endorphin Speed 3, though perhaps slightly improved from the slightly thicker and tougher rubber here in the forefoot. I'm going to give the Endorphin Speed 4 a 2.6 out of 3 for value after my initial runs. Bit heavier, bit more expensive, probably slightly better durability. If I've totaled the scores up correctly, that gives us 10.4 out of 12 after my initial runs for the Saucony Endorphin Speed 4. Have you picked up the Endorphin Speed 4? How did you get on with the 3? Is it still that sort of high tempo do-it-all shoe for you? Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments. Very quick musical interlude for you to check out. Back from the year 2000 we have Neil Young's Silver and Gold. I want to talk about the title track in fact, which is the best one on the album. Mainly acoustic album this one, just with some very basic instrumentation in the background. Silver and Gold's a beautiful piece, clearly played on a Martin guitar. It just sort of chimes and rings out beautifully. There's a very subtle and sentimental kind of vocal where Neil's sort of talking about, you know, giving up this big treasure chest of gold that he's got because he's quite happy just with his people, you know, his family and his friends and his kids. Really is a lovely sentiment to have in a world where everybody's sort of grabbing all the time for attention and money. Gotta remember that none of that stuff ever makes you happy. Little things that your son might say to you, or, you know, spending a quiet moment with the cat, spotting something really interesting that you've never seen before outside, just appreciating, you know, being here. That's what silver and gold is all about, I think. And you can't capture that on your mobile phone either. Go and check it out, people. Silver and Gold by Neil Young. Thanks for tuning in. It is always appreciated. Hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up like. My name's Eddbud, and I'll be seeing you